Best deep threat, Mike. That's your first wide receiver superlative. Who you got there?
This one's tough. There's a few good ones in this draft class. I would highlight Nebraska's Trey Palmer, who had the fastest 40 at the combine, I believe, had the fastest speed at the Senior Bowl, 21.1 miles per hour. Like, he can fly. She has kind of bad hands, though. He's a good deep threat, but just maybe not a reliable one. I think Quentin Johnston's maybe your best, like, one-on-one deep threat, that if I want to run a go ball on the outside, he's the guy probably I would put my money on to win that go ball in this draft class. But then just who has the best explosiveness, who changes the game, who has that, like, fear speed that they can put in opposing defenses, is Jalen Hyatt to me, the Tennessee wide receiver. That's why he's getting drafted wherever he gets drafted. It's not because he's a complete route runner. It's not because he's super dynamic after the catch. It's because if you forget about him, if you're flat-footed as a safety and he got a free release coming on you, you're toast. He just has, I don't really care if he only ran a 4.4 at the combine. On the football field, he plays with elite speed. So, yeah, Jalen Hyatt's the one where you want speed in this draft class. You want a guy to really bring that element. He's your guy.
He ranked very high in the tracking data speed. So,
yes,
forget the 4.4 flats thing. Like, that's a guy where a lot of times teams right now you're hearing are ignoring, if not dismissing entirely, the 40 times and relying on the tracking data. Jalen Hyatt's tracking data essentially says if he's not faster than 4.4, then the 4.4 like plays differently when he's out there. Like, he is a legitimate burner. Do you have any concerns that the offense that we talked about is not propping him up, but maybe making him look a little bit better at that stuff than he actually is, in terms of like stacked releases from the slot, never being bumped at the line, all that kind of stuff?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's why I've said, like, he's the threat. I don't know if he's the best deep receiver, but like the threat of the speed there. That's why I said, like, if I want to run a go ball on the outside, I'd probably pick Quentin Johnston. But if I have a guy, motioning into the slot, and I know he's going to get a free release, and I just want him to go deep, I'm going Jalen Hyatt there. So, yeah, I do have serious concerns about that, especially when you're 173 pounds. It's tough. If you've never dealt with NFL caliber strength on the outside, it's different. And there's a lot of guys in that mold who are freakishly fast. If you go back and look at, top 10 fastest receivers in combine history, not a lot of them are players. It's difficult to be able to be a complete player when you're that fast. And I actually have a take about that guys who have like sprinting backgrounds are worse wide receivers, because the gait that it takes to be like a high-end sprinter is not conducive to stopping. You are striding outward. You're really getting to really maximize your speed. You have to get as long a stride length as possible. And when you're doing that, you can't come to a stop nearly as fast as guys who have maybe a more lateral gait, who are maybe a little choppier, who have a little different running style. And so that's why I think like the Devontae Adams, Justin Jeffersons of the world, who have kind of, Justin Jefferson almost runs like a deer. Devontae kind of shuffles. Those weirder gaits lend themselves to being able to stop it.
All right. I like that. I like that you've also thought about this in this kind of semantic detail. Like anyone else would just go deep threat, like it's the same thing. You have analyzed the term threat rather than, deep receiver. It's more nuanced than that. I like that, Mike. That's the kind of special level of detail you're bringing to the table here. What about the best route runner?
Best route runner, this is Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, there's a few others in this draft class I like. Obviously, Jordan Addison's one of the better route runners in USC. I think Zay's a pretty good route runner, too. Michael Wilson from Stanford's a good route runner. But Jackson Smith-Njigba, I wrote today, it was only at Ohio State for 3 years, but he got his PhD in route running in only 3 years. It was only 2 years, really, because it was a sophomore tape they were basing this off. He just, he knows how to separate. He's got a lot of tricks in his bag and kind of just understands how to play the position. So yeah, that's why I'm high on him. That's why he's, I think 12th in the PFF board, maybe 11th. I don't know. He's high on the PFF board. And he's a great route runner. I just think that translates very well.
He was talking at the podium at the combine, and a lot of times these guys talk at the podium and it's 10 minutes of nothing or whatever. But he was saying stuff I think that was pretty interesting. He was talking about the receivers in the NFL that he studies or watches tape of and all this kind of thing. And he was saying that he loves Stephon Diggs, and the reason that he loves Stephon Diggs is because every movement and head fake and all that kind of thing that Diggs makes is super exaggerated. Like, it's over the top to get the DB to buy into something. So when you've got a guy like Smith and Jigba who has that absurd 3-cone change of direction ability, and on top of that, he's like magnifying the fake so that a guy is going to buy it every time. Like that's just supercharging your ability to separate on everything, underneath and horizontal. And every break you make it's exaggerated. It's magnified the actual success that it has because you're doing the kind of stuff that you don't need to do at that speed.
Yeah, and I think the intriguing thing to me about JSN also is that we saw his sophomore tape. There's the last guy that we really was in that mold who we didn't see as a junior but dominated as a sophomore was, Jamar Chase. There's still physical development that occurs between year 2 and year 3. When you're 19 years old, 20 years old. I know everyone's questioning his speed and it's like, oh, is the 4.52 or 4.5, whatever you want to. Whatever he ran at his pro day, is that real? Well, he may have actually gotten faster because that's what happens at that age. People improve physically. So we just didn't get to see it with him.
I also think it's why the idea that he could be a better player or do more at the NFL level than he did in college is not off the table. Like he's just being talked about as this slot only guy, but his route running is exceptional. It's not just route running, but to play on the outside, you need releases as well, which we'll get to in a second, which is a little bit different, but kind of cut from the same cloth. Like if he can do all that kind of stuff, 4.5 is fine. Like it's not prohibitively bad for the outside. Like these are the kinds of things that would let him play on the outside and be more than just a slot receiver at the next level.
I agree with that take. I do think that a lot of slot only is why we're like, oh, why can't they play on the outside? Usually it's size. Usually it's the play strength aspect, which is not. He may be a little tightly wound. He may not have the biggest wingspan for like a 6'1" wide receiver, but he's not small.
Right.
He's not. His play strength has never been a question, and that's something that when that's the case, like usually you should be able to play on the outside still. It's just that. Oh, they had the 10th and 11th pick at outside wide receiver who ran in the 4.3s. Of course, you're going to put them as the outside guys in that offense.
What about the releases then? Because it's kind of an element to route running, but it's slightly different and does play into that ability to play outside and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure JSN's got some good releases. You don't get to see a ton in the slot. But the guy who I loved at the Senior Bowl with what he did, with what he does on tape at Stanford, is Michael Wilson. And I think at his size, so he's like 6'2", 216. You have more options when you're in that mold. When you have strength as an ability too. If you're going against like a 180-pound corner, you can just fire. Instead of who's pressing you, you don't have to go around him. You can just go right through him and bowl him over. You can AJ Brown him to Christian Fulton when you're that big sometimes. So I think he's just got a lot in his bag. And then at that size, see the 40, I think it was 4.59, not great. And you're like, oh, can he play on the outside? Is that going to translate? Well, his 10 split was 1.5. His 10 split was one of the better 10 splits. I think it was the 4th best 10 split in this wide receiver class. He's 216 pounds. Like the guy gets off the line of scrimmage. That was similar to me, that was a lot like how Michael Thomas was coming out of Ohio State in that, I think he ran a 4.59 too, or like right in the 4.6 range. But getting off the line of scrimmage, he was sudden. And then you saw that translate right away to the Saints until obviously wheels fell off with injuries. But I feel similarly about Michael Wilson.
Yeah, I really liked Michael Wilson's tape when I was going through the wide receivers. I think he's a guy like in the mid rounds that may end up being a really good player if he stays healthy. Okay, so after the catch and freakiest athlete, effectively, you've got as the same guy. It's your guy, Quentin Johnston from TCU.
I am curious why people are starting to sour on Quentin Johnston. I think he is one of the highest end athletes I've seen at the position since I started doing this. I mean, I just think a guy with a 6'10" wingspan, 208 pounds, to be able to move the way he does, and 45 broken tackles on 115 career catches is, I think, still like almost like a 10% more higher broken tackle rate than even Deebo Samuel was coming out of South Carolina in his career. Like the guy is difficult to bring down because he's so solidly built, like not an ounce of fat on this guy at 208 pounds. And then to be as explosive as he is, I just think there's a path to success. Now I get there, route running concerns. 10% drop rate, which I have a take on his drop rate that you go back and watch them. The vast majority are Max Duggan fireballs that are not even spirals. Max Duggan was not even throwing spirals. I counted 4 on his tape that were 100% Max Duggan's fault this past year. That's like, I think he's getting a little undervalued in that regard of the hands questions, just because he was playing with a guy who, you go back and watch the combine, the guys that were Max Duggan was throwing to, he was last in the gauntlet line. Those guys were dropping a lot of those because he just, I saw him try to hit the net at the Senior Bowl and the dude was missing. He took like 15 minutes to even hit the net. So, okay, I digress there. But Quentin Johnston, I do think, is just a unique dude that some way, shape, or form he's going to succeed in the NFL.
But you know why he's slipping. Like, there's...
Okay, yeah,
there's
I know why,
obvious...
but I'm curious why, like, do you really value the ball skills or worry about the ball skills that much, or is the route running, or which aspect is really the one that is making people, like, he's in the 30s on some people's boards, in which that floors me.
I mean, I get it. Like, the first thing when I was looking, I start doing the draft stuff, and I go to our big board and I just start working top to bottom, like start from the top, work my way down. And obviously Quentin Johnston was the number 1 wide receiver on your board. And after watching him for a few minutes, I'm like, I don't understand. Why? What am I looking for here? Because he's pretty bad at a lot of like fairly fundamental wide receiver things. And then the offset obviously is the stuff you're talking about, which is he is a pretty freaky athlete. And, if you get the ball in his hands on a hitch and he turns upfield immediately, the dude can be gone, like turn a hitch into a touchdown in a heartbeat. But he's not, forget the catching part, like the drops, but he's not even good just at the catching bit. Like the ball skills thing is not good. Like deep down the field, he sort of shows willing for a lot of those catches, but it feels like almost like an act. Like, I'm not really going to catch this, but I need to go up and show willing, and otherwise I'm not getting the ball again. Like, he's just not good at that stuff.
Yeah, he's not your over the middle of the field guy, I will say. Some alligator arms on tape.
Yeah. Okay, so the flip side of that is, who's the best at the catch point in this class?
That to me is Cedric Tillman, the Tennessee wide receiver.
The other Tennessee.
Another big body, like massive, 220 pounder, very physical, beats guys up. I think 19 of 32 in contested situations the last 2 years. That's like his game. He is kind of, your big possession wide receiver, like what the traits that it takes to be a possession wide receiver. Like, that's Cedric Tillman. He has all those traits. So if that's what you want in your offense, if that's a type, big slot that a lot of teams are falling in love with, that's Cedric Tillman.
And best hands.
There's not a lot of great hands in this draft. Cedric Tillman's got really good hands, I will say. More better hands in the tight end class. But Charlie Jones, the Purdue wide receiver, is the one who had the lowest drop rate in this draft class. 6 drops on 155 catchable for his career.